Welcome to the Business of Platforms, a video podcast series where Vivaldi will be chatting with the world's leading marketers, thinkers, and innovators about the evolution of business and the exciting ways in which platforms are helping companies and brands deliver greater value.
Welcome. This is Erich Joachimsthaler. I'm the host of the podcast, The Business of Platform. I'm here today with Emil Fuglsang from the company called Meta. I'm most excited because Emil is from Copenhagen. So I come from Germany, so I have a great pleasure to welcome you. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Eric. And thanks for having me.
The podcast is designed to talk about platform businesses, to talk about startups, to talk about traditional firms that make that shift to the platform economy, that push the envelope, that sort of develop exponential growth in their businesses, that disrupt categories and that disrupt industries. And I have one here that is not just with Meta, the company Meta. It's not just about disrupting something, it's actually building something, building a sustainable business and a sustainable world and a planet. And that's why I think it's so exciting to see the COO and co-founder, Emil Fuglsang. Emil, tell us about Meta.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I'll give you a short introduction. So we're a FinTech company based out of Copenhagen, and we do two things. We work in collaborations with big financial institutions, typically pension funds, to offer sustainable pension savings to individuals. We do that by helping them create sustainable investment funds and offer a digital engaging experience on top of that is catered to deliver on promises and customer experiences around sustainability. Mm-hmm. So you could say that's a B2C based business model where we are in the market for communicating to individual pension savers and companies that want a corporate pension plan based on sustainable investments. So that's Matter as a B2C brand. Mm-hmm. On top of that, we are also suppliers of software to the financial service industry. And we do that by helping screen portfolios on a range of sustainability criteria and report on impact. So a range of impact metrics from the carbon intensity of your investments to the share of your portfolio that could be invested in harmful or beneficial companies. And both these business models basically run on the same core engine, you could say. So it's very much a software company. Mm-hmm. And that engine is one of that's based on a lot of analysis. Powered by quite a few AI features that help us navigate the complex landscape of data on sustainability. So we specialize in sourcing data from a range of NGOs, research agencies, academics around the world that publish, credible sources that would publish data on, say, for example, companies that have an outstanding performance within something, or companies that have that act in a way that is problematic in terms of deforestation, or that are weapons producers, etc. So where we really differ is we found a way to collect all this data, synthesize it into a framework for sustainable investments that we can use to screen investment portfolios, and basically connect the dots that are already existing out there in the world, where tons of experts in NGOs, for example, with their feet on the ground, deliver cutting-edge analyses of the companies that are doing good and the companies that are doing bad, and that's data that is not being utilized currently right now. Mm-hmm. So that's some of the stuff that we have we've started working on. So we have clients both that are individual customers, mm-hmm. and then we have clients in the financial industry.
So it's almost like almost like a two-sided marketplace in a way that you help the B2B side and you help the consumer side in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You could say that I think our overall mission is connecting people to their money, right? So for consumers, that means providing them with a financial product that's transparent, where we have clear customer promises. For example, no investments in fossil fuels or weapons production, so tobacco production, etc., that you can deliver on and help them attain complete transparency into what the money is invested in, etc. And it's the same thing for the institutional investors, right? Giving them complete transparency into where their money is, what they're doing, and what the civil society and the experts around the world are saying about the conduct of these companies, and not just what these companies are reporting themselves.
Yeah. Now, so principally, the idea is a really good one. It's a healthy one. It's sort of, we all would sort of buy into it. Sort of, who would not? In some ways, in some ways, it's sort of a clear value proposition from that. I think you're just 2 years old, right? How in those 2 years you have been able to, as a one of 500, let's say, fintech startups, how you've been able to cut through and sort of been able to tell your story?
Well, I think I would probably point to two things. The first one relates to our approach to, developing a compelling customer experience. Mm-hmm. So we've worked a lot with sort of gaining insights in how people relate to finance, how people think about planning for the future, think about sustainability, and try to build a customer experience around that. And that's new. The financial industry, even though it is very tech-driven by now, it doesn't innovate that fast when it comes to new value propositions. So if you come out with a product that doesn't win on technical fidelity, but just by saying, for once we can promise you something normative about your money, for once we can actually give you a concrete promise and an experience that doesn't require you to be financially literate or being a high net worth individual. You just make one decision, and suddenly you have this empowerment that is normally reserved for rich individuals, basically. That is, see yourself as a stockholder, see yourself as an investor, someone who's, impacting the world with your money. And taking that experience from sort of wealthy individuals and bringing it out to the masses where, in Europe, a lot of us have these big fat pension plans, has been granting us quite a lot of attention, because it's basically taking a concept like pension that no one has ever cared about, and that has never been, there are not a lot of companies that have found the way to basically activate these savings and create an interesting experience around them. So we've I think it's fair to say that we've succeeded in that. That doesn't mean we've succeeded as a company, but we've been able to create something new. So that's definitely on the one side in the customer experience. Delivering on that also requires that there's an IC platform that can report on impact, that can provide complete transparency into what's in the portfolio, but also run sort of an early warning system, which is, what is the world actually saying about this, so that we as Matter know what to tell our customers when let's say one of the companies in the portfolios runs into trouble. And succeeding with that is actually the second part of why I think we've received some attention, and that is the logic of how we've built the underlying analysis and basically the architecture of the software that we're also selling to financial service providers. So that is combined. What we've done is basically we've tried to combine some competencies that rarely meet in the financial industry. So I have a background from classic management consulting, but also more anthropologically led work within building the consumer insights. My co-founder Niels worked in the United Nations. The other core members of the team are quant traders or engineers. And bringing that together helped us sort of design a system that is dedicated to delivering analysis for companies that want to create sustainable investment profiles and deliver promises. So that means you don't just want to create a sustainable investment strategy. You also want to be able to tell something to a customer at the end. Yeah. And that requires that you're very, very, very certain of what's in your portfolio. Yeah. And that you have a high level of confidence of what the world around you, rather than the companies in the financial industry itself, believes is sustainable, and how that relates to what you're investing in. It helps real time connect you to so many different sources around the world that are category experts within deforestation, armament, weapons production, production of fossil fuels, etc. to get this 360 overview of what civil society actually says about the companies that you're in.
So when you say customer experience, there must be. I need to try this out. I have to say,
Yeah.
I believe that there is from your experience, there must be an easy way to make this work. And it's about empowerment. It's almost like to make the consumer informed, much more informed. You talked about how you provide data and also information that when you think of your own pension funds, anyone that has one or participates in that, it's all of a bit of a black box to you, and you rely on some financial advisor that that not everything is what he says is 100%. It's sort of a very nebulous. Even if you have a good relationship with your trusted advisor, you still consider like I wouldn't trust him. It's sort of a sort of like he's moving the money around or she and makes his money somehow. So there is sort of like this it's a curious thing because for your product, because on one side you deliver sort of something that the industry so far has been successfully kept into a black box in some ways, and sort of like so you never know, you're not close, you don't feel like you're close to it. On the other side, you're selling a product to millennials who are a long way from thinking even about pension. So isn't that a curious sort of and you make it work, which is sort of so exciting about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's the $1 million question here is how do you actually make pension relevant to young people, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've been struggling with. The cool thing about talking about sustainability is that when you talk about pension and sustainability, people listen because you talk about sustainability, and they do that because you look at what the financial service industry has been doing for 50 years. When they've been talking about retirement savings and pension, they've been talking about the future. So they have basically been telling you should prepare. Out there's a life awaiting for you, and it needs you to save up, needs you to prepare now. The benefit of saving up today can be harvested 30 years from now. Yeah. What we're doing is we're saying by making a decision today with the money, you can change the course of the world. You can actually affect the direction of where we're heading with this world, and you can attain a sense of empowerment that millennials are struggling to feel. It's a chronically disempowered generation, right? Or at least has a sense of disempowerment. Yeah. So by basically helping people see that the value of what money can do today and understand how pension isn't just about the future, but it's about the world we're building, because all the money in pension funds are being invested into companies that are building the tomorrow, right? So I think that's been, from a marketing point of view, really interesting, but also something you can deliver on quite concretely in a digital experience, because you can show the impact. You can literally measure the amount of CO2 you avoid by not investing in fossil fuel deposits, or the amount of renewable energy generated compared to the average pension fund, right? Because there's data on this. You can provide full transparency so people can see what their money is invested in, relevant news stories, etc. And suddenly a universe of possibilities opens up, because you're no longer talking about the future. You're talking about today, talking about what all of this money is doing. Most of us have pension savings. It's just not seen as part of that category. So once you start activating that, talking about how that's relevant today, it's really empowering to find out as a millennial that you have $40,000 sitting in some account, and that money is actually doing something that is aligned with your values, right?
I think this is totally a new world, because I think even not just millennials, but Generation Z, the new ones, is even more so, because we did at Vivaldi, we did a study, and we found that people will, the joy of knowing that I have if I pay on a daily basis, for a 18-year-old or 17 or 19-year-old is enormous. We saw it live in focus groups, and I was flabbergasted. I said, like, why would this be important to you? What happens in 40 or 50 years? He says, like, this is I'm part of this. I'm going, Papa. Exactly. I asked my son. He says, like, Papa, you're not going to live that long, but I'm going to be around in those years. And I hope to be around. So it's
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's been a tendency to also criticize the generation of millennials for being irresponsible. And I think what we found, before we started even building the first concepts for Matter, we interviewed more than 200 people, which I think is also a bit odd for a fintech. Typically, you start off with a hypothesis, do a few interviews, and then you just, you get going. Mm-hmm. And before we even started building the logic, before we even started thinking about how to deliver on a promise around sustainability, mm-hmm. we spoke to so many people. Everything from 20-minute short interviews to 3-hour in-depth interviews in people's homes. And I think what we found is that there's a general conception in society that millennials do not take responsibility, do not act very responsibly, at least not when it comes to their financial situation. Mm-hmm. But what we saw is people actually really want to feel responsible. They have quite a lot of strategies in place, but the financial industry isn't set up to deliver very well on it. Mm. So as soon as you can, it's not very meaningful for millennials who suffer from climate anxiety as well and are realizing that there might not be a world that's really interesting to retire in 30 years from now, right? Yep. If you stop talking about the money you'll have in that world, you start talking about the power you actually have today in affecting the course with the money you have, you see that there's a huge responsibility to tap into with this millennial generation. And I've been very very surprised, but also touched about that, with seeing that at times, because people care so much. Yeah. Like there's so many good intentions. So it's just a matter of finding a way to deliver on it.
To deliver on it. And I think that if I had this one learning lesson that I just hear from you is, number one, you need it's really deep. In order to be successful, it's to really deeply thinking about that value proposition. Why is it not served by the existing industry? That's what you said. Like the financial services industry does not deliver on it. So it's not served. There's a goodness to the value proposition. But a lot of people say good things about their value and their promise and their purpose. But what I think is interesting is what you are able to do is. Emil, is you making a future promise and you make it tangible today. So, like when everybody, yes. It's easy to sell the financial services industry sells the future. If you're not saving now, you will not have enough money in retirement. You need to now say this. It's almost like a scare tactic. It's sort of like a negative framing of your promise and value proposition purpose. But what you do is you're making it a positive thing. You have we all live in a reality in the future. We have to want to live in the future. And you bring this, make it tangible through your data, through your information that you provide. You make it sort of real to anyone on the mobile phone in a way, on a daily basis. It's not something that part of a news program, 60 Minutes we have here in New York, in the US, on a Sunday evening. It's something that you can actually sort of like deliberate on a subway and can say, okay, here, look, this is where my little piece, my world, this is how I contribute to this, and this. So it's a kind of an interesting thing of how the value proposition, that even though it's future, a future value proposition of savings for pension, for your retirement, it's also very tangible here and now, right now, and I think that's sort of powerful.
I'm happy to see that way. I think that has been what excited us the most as well. One thing that I think is also interesting, and that may also couple it to sort of why the analysis behind the whole thing is so interesting, is that while people definitely care about the possibility of making, having an impact, making a positive contribution to the society with the money, they are also quite skeptical. And I think this is why a lot of the existing financial providers out there are hesitant, or at least cautious with making bold promises around sustainability. First of all, it's one of the industries in the world with the lowest trust, other than, what you normally say, used car salesmen. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, they don't have tools in place to actually understand what's in their portfolio. So what we saw from our customer research was that when we asked people what it takes to deliver on a sustainable promise, we wouldn't ask like that, of course, but try to understand what is a good success with sustainability. First of all, it's concrete. Yep. That means it's something you can see. So sorting out your waste or biking in the rain is fantastic, because there's a token, there's an artifact at times, right? It sounds lame, but the banana peel goes into the organic waste, or the bio waste. So you can track it. You can actually understand, and you get some sort of validation that this actually works. Whereas offsetting plane travels with carbon credits is obscure and there is no success to it. So that led us to find two things that have been driving our design thinking, or our thinking around designs, because wouldn't say we've used that much on design thinking, but that has been number one. It has to be concrete. You have to be able to deliver on this in a way where people can touch it, see it, feel it, meaning at least numbers, concrete impact metrics, compared to the alternative of not having a sustainable investment plan for your pension. Secondly, you need to make damn sure that when you promise sustainability, it is sustainable, because people are very skeptical. And what we found was that the tools that we had that are available in the market today, they're not bad, but they're just not designed for making customer-facing promises around sustainability. So if you, for example, want to promise people that we do not invest in weapons, that's easy if you only construct an investment portfolio with 50 stocks, because you can manually sit and review each of these companies and you'll be pretty sure. Once you're in pension, you have thousands of assets in your portfolio. So you need another way of assessing each of the assets. And a good example is we've been in dialogue with a Scandinavian bank that we did some screening services for, and they asked us, and they said, you've marked one of our assets as a weapons producer, and we don't understand it because the data, the so-called ESG, environmental social governance data that we are buying to assess the sustainability of our portfolio does not mark this company as a weapons producer. And we were like, well, this is according to these two research organizations that we source our data from. They are experts, world experts on whether or not anyone is a weapons producer. As an example, look up CPRI in Stockholm. They know, and these companies that supply the data, they don't. They're reliant on what the data that the companies that's listed companies that they're surveying, what they tell them. So suddenly we have a way of basically knowing more about, we have a more critical view on the portfolio. And that has been essential in being able to promise the end customer sustainability, because you would rather have one too few than one too many in your portfolio. And I think this will really change as we go forward, and sustainability moves from being sort of machine room engine logic. You'll need systems that can guarantee that this is sustainable, not just from your logic, but also in the eyes of civil society. And that's where I think we're also moving closer to this sort of platform for analytical capabilities, where NGOs can tap in with their knowledge and financial industry can get their portfolios analyzed, and you can basically try to connect the dots that haven't been connected today.
It's sort of fascinating what platforms can do. Clean. I always say, I call it industry strains. Real challenges in the industry, and there's one part of making the business profitable and to grow a good business that at matter. But there's also another part that is sort of like in industry. It's like there's another journey there's another part. In your case, there's the part of sustainability, building a sustainable world and planet. But there's also the industry. There you sort of like industry practices that have defied so far the cleanup. You sort of like get at least a handle on it and a chance to nibble at a solution, right? Yeah, no, definitely. And I think coming into this game of this space as a startup is interesting because it is creativity from constraint. There's no way we are gonna, if we were to, for example, if we just wanted to come in with the ambition of supplying screening services or data, sustainability data for the financial industry, we would have to mimic what it's doing today. And that would be, let's just try to collect data more in a more advanced way. So maybe we would try to use AI to scrape annual reports or something like that. Yeah. It would still be, self-reporting to a large extent from the companies. But because we started with the B2C perspective because we actually tried to deliver a B2B software as a service solution by talking to the end customers that any of our clients would serve, whether it is as fund managers for a pension fund or as a pension fund itself for a bank. We were led to design our method in a completely different way with a much higher level of certainty to be able to make promises, right? And from a financial point of view, that's not important. I mean, if you want to avoid exposure to the weapons industry, you'll be fine with what you can get today. But if you want to start promising people anything around it, you're not, because you will be investing in weapons, right? So I think, again, this is where it's a lot of fun to come in as a startup, because the creativity from constraint forces you down some pathways that you typically don't think of if you have a
multi-million dollar budget and a big team of developers, and you have, fixed timelines and an existing portfolio of clients that are awaiting something that looked a bit like what we needed before. So that's the privilege we have as well, right?
I mean, in a way, if you think of a traditional business, it's almost what you have done is reverse the order of how you build a business, because the traditional business says, I'm going to build something and then I'm going to offer a product and service. I mean, that's been the value chain for 100 years. People build a car, even Steve Jobs used to say, consumers cannot know what they have not experienced. So we are going to build it, and then they will like it. In the Apple case, he's been many times really right. But you build a product, but you did it the other way around in some ways. You start with a customer. You did this anthropological research. You're almost virgin to the industry and says, something is really important here that matters. Here comes the name. To build this, I need to also be able to deliver it, and that's where you go back to the data and now it's kind of like it's the opposite way of how business normally is built.
I very much agree. I think it's an interesting perspective. At the same time, I also think there are some analogies to the way a lot of industries work today, which is, I used to work as a consultant. I did some work for a supplier of building materials. Mm-hmm. And they hired me to do anthropological research, to go out and find out how houses have been developing and what that has been meaning for how people live in them. And that is their end customers. To some extent, they are the people living in the houses, but most of the times they will be, architects or professional developers, etc. So there is some interesting logic in basically going out and asking the people who will use your product, even though they're not your customers, mm-hmm. What does it take for me to deliver a value proposition that our customers, in this case banks, for example, mm-hmm. can use to basically deliver a better experience to you. And designing software that way is very fascinating endeavor, because just as you said, it reverses things around. Instead of going to the banks and say, do you want it a bit faster, and do you want it to come in blue? You say, I've been speaking to someone else, and you may not have heard this yet, because people don't voice a lot of requirements when it comes to finance. They sit still and then they change bank if they get annoyed. But that doesn't mean that you cannot impress them, and that you cannot move very far and create products that can help you acquire customers and retain customers if you just start talking to them. So it's fun for us to come sort of the B2B side as well and say, we did this in Denmark. This is our showroom. Do come and have a look at how we are attracting customers with a very engaging customer experience. And we've spent 2 years in building an AI-powered platform that can help you do just the same. And again, that's back to the logic of we don't have to do this by ourselves all over the world. We are very happy to work with partners to get them basically onboarded on the platform and start delivering sustainable savings themselves.
Now, Denmark is a relatively small country, and I'd be curious what comes after that. Once you have built that business, where you are at your stage of the business. Before this podcast, we talked about Jack Ma, who now dominates China in all of retail, and there's now Southeast Asia, is also in Africa and in Europe, and there's sort of some level of world domination. What is your version of world domination?
It's a scary question, right? I think the way we see this is we hope that we can provide something that resembles a platform. Mm-hmm. Not in the maybe most classic sense of platform businesses, but something where NGOs will have a stronger and stronger incentive to supply more and more data. Mm-hmm. Think about it. We have tens of thousands of experts running around the world that are not helping the financial industry make decisions. Yes. And at the same time, a platform where financial service providers who they will pay to receive a subscription of screenings throughout a year, or maybe go in and just get a one-off screening of their portfolios, or want to do bespoke integrations and get reporting into their own front ends, that these providers will see an increased incentive of basically contributing to this platform. Yeah. Most of them today, of course, have strong NDAs, so you can't, and they do not want you to share the data that you're analyzing for them, which makes a lot of sense. But as we move forward, if you can do that in an anonymized way, where you help the financial industry get a better perspective of where they track according to the benchmark.
Yes.
If they, tick the box and say, we're willing to share this data anonymously, remove the weighings of the assets so that no one can copy the portfolio, but just give us an idea of where we are, and you can connect them to the NGO community.
Yeah.
We can actually, all we have to do is provide the infrastructure and help these worlds start talking together. Because if what is happening today is the direction the world is moving in, if individuals start caring more and more about the money, if corporate, if organizations start caring more and more about where the company pension plan is invested, we will need civil society more and more as our backstop or as a guarantee of whether or not this is greenwashing, whether or not what the fund manager is telling us is actually true.
Yeah.
And we don't have the infrastructure in place in the world right now to have those bits and pieces connect and talk to each other. So I think that's our vision for what this could become.
It's a beautiful vision, because it's almost and I wonder whether that is sort of if sort of particular to platforms, because everybody wins. The NGOs win, the financial services industry wins. The end consumer, you and I, win. It's a new form of competition that through collaboration, through sharing of data, through more transparency, through this exchange of, if you will, these platform dynamics, everybody really has only to gain.
I share the perspective, and I think that is also what is characteristic for some of the more mission-driven startups in the world. We don't set out there with this sort of, with the cutthroat ambition of winning. Of course we want to win because we want to grow and we want to be big and we want to be successful, and we want what we've spent, cast our lives into to be something that people around the world use and care for. The ambition is to create something completely new, which is to the advantage of a lot of people at the same time. And you'll see that with a lot of impact-driven startups, that there is a second bottom line, right? There's an added ambition on top of saving the world from catastrophic climate change, and on top of making profit.
Yeah.
There is also this added idea that what if we sort of rewired some of the fabrics of international markets, and started connecting the capital markets with the civil society. Something probably some of the two sectors in the modern capitalistic society that are most disconnected: civil society and finance.
I love that. People always say that you have to have a purpose and for your business. And sometimes we all struggle. What is the purpose? Why would I have to get up in the morning? Why do I have to get up? Why? So like, what motivates you? But if you play this correctly, if you sort of frame the purpose of your business correctly, it's really a beautiful thing. It's you profit is one piece, and obviously that's a good thing to have. But there's so many pieces that even in a startup of at Meta, let's say, it's totally invigorating for employees to say, look, I need to make my paycheck and pay my rent and things like that. But there's I contribute in a way, in a small way to some bigger thing, so.
Exactly. Yeah. No, and I think that's a separate discussion, but imagine you've been an employer for 30 years and every month you've seen, say, 8% of your employees' salary you pay on top of their existing salary. This would be quite common in Denmark. You pay an additional 8% into a pension plan. Mm-hmm. You get zero value out of it. That's not true. You do get some value. There are insurances associated with you that make sure that your employees are taken care of if something bad happens to them. Mm-hmm. And you can rest assured that they are well taken care of the day they retire. But that's it. It's just the only benefit is the sense of the security for your employees. Yeah. But what if the added benefit was that you could help, push the world in a different direction? We're talking millions of dollars for most, even just medium-sized companies every year. That's just running into the pension plan, right?
Yeah.
So this is a way of also taking something that, used to just be a number on the paycheck, used to just be a number in the annual report or in the, in the salary system, and suddenly it's a tool to direct the world in a different direction. And I think that's that's also part of the mission we're on. It's just helping connect people to the money and help them understand that, you have power. All of us in the Western world, we have enormous savings. We're investors.
Yeah.
We can point in a direction, and the world will actually move according to it.
And if I were to be a typical firm, that says, look, for my employees, we put 8% into a pension fund. To me, you have to. It's almost, there's a lot of things that you have to change. The one thing that gets me is when I entered the business world. For us, we lived in a world of, we are competing for market share. The number one and the number two competitor is the one who makes profit, and everybody else is less profitable unless you're a niche player. You need to conquer markets. You need to compete against those over there. We need to be better, faster, and cheaper than over there. And the whole mindset was of us against others. It's a mindset of competition, and the 8% that you would contribute, it's sort of a necessity that you have to do as part of being in business.
Versus, just a cost, right?
Exactly, it's a cost of doing business. Now, so for a traditional company, it's almost like a generation like myself has to rethink. It's like there needs to be a fundamental mindset shift of how you think about the business, because you're not alone trying to compete with so many others. You are part of a connected world. Number two, you need to change your operating model. The operating model isn't just to make the profits. It's like and better, faster, cheaper, and drive people sort of like to insane working hours, let's say, and because to extract maximum for the given salary or something like that, working out. So it's a fundamental mindset that is going on here, and a fundamental change in an operating model. And now, and third, there is the way you measure yourself has to be different. The way when you consider valuable metrics. I make money like a pig. That's not a metric anymore. No. So I think that you got to rethink that. So it's kind of like a beautiful sort of like shift in it. This is not about platform business. This is not about startup. This is not about fintech. This is about a new definition of what a firm is all about. A company.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a chance to maybe also rewire some of the structures. If you look at NGOs today, what is the role of an NGO? It's just as a watchdog. What if we could pay them for their analyses? They're very valuable.
Yeah.
But who is to pay them? Well, typically you would never think of a bank. Why would a bank pay World Wildlife Foundation for something? But if you can start, basically aligning interests. Yeah. That is happening as the world is normatively organizing itself towards a more sustainable goal. I think there's a plethora of interesting new business models that open up in front of us. Ours is just one of them.
Yeah, and I love this point. We should actually stop the conversation here because I know you have a lot to do in order to build your business, and I really appreciate the time you took here on the call. And that is we also think just about customers, employees and competitors, and you have now sort of brought in the NGO, sort of like looking at the larger what I call in my book an interaction field that really you really need to think about, because they are sort of critical, almost like influencer or market makers or critical influences in the enterprise. So wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, Emil, thank you once again from Copenhagen, the company Meta, one of the most exciting startups in the fintech world. Thank you for being on the podcast, and I hope we chat very soon again.
Thanks for having me. Likewise.